Well, there we go. That's pretty much Europe right there. Except that this time, it's not that funny.
Kinda hurts.
Europe has actually been flailing and swinging the sanctions sword right in front of the Russians' face so much and for so long until Europe actually succeeded in cutting its own off. Hungary accepts somewhere between 10 and 15,000 Ukrainian refugees per day. So
although the maximum was 28,000. There was one day with 28,000.
How is thank you in Ukrainian?
Right, in Ukrainian.
I'm sure it's not spasiba, is it?
It's not spasiba, it's дякую.
What?
And why does Adam know all this so well?
Well, wait, before you tell my story, let's play some sad song. Not you.
Sad songs to make you cry. Well, Adam is from Ukraine, yes.
Knock it off the world stage. It has no place there. But there's a small problem. Russia too has nuclear weapons.
71.4% of our territory was taken away, with 63.5% of the population also being forced to live under foreign rule from then on. 61.4% of our farmland and a whopping 83.4% of our forests were taken away. Gone were also 2/3 of our cities and towns, 73.8% of our paved roads, 62.1% of our railroads, and 75% of our actual trains and freight cars. Why was all this? Because we were the bad guys. The safety of our people is our main concern. Unlike the US, which leaves its allies, even some of its own people, in Taliban or other enemies' hands these days, we don't do this. Well, to be fair, neither was this American practice before Joe Biden, or Hillary Clinton in Benghazi for that matter. But hey, times change. But not for us. We care for our brothers, even if they live in another country. We have nothing, not one little tiny thing to do with the moral posturing and virtue signaling that followed the death of George Floyd. Hello everybody, I'm Zsolt Jasinski, the political hobbyist, and this is my show, The Political Hobbyist. It's been quite a while since we last did an English version. Whoa, how time flies. It was 2 years ago when we had the distinguished writer and editor, Rod Dreher, author of the wonderful and thought-provoking book, The Benedict Option, as our guest. Click here to see that episode. And since we had quite a few comments under that video, for which we cannot thank our viewers enough, saying we should do this more often. So here we are.
2 years later.
What's
2 years later.
Come on, what's 2 years? Blink of an eye. And we have a wonderful piece of news today, actually two. One, Rod Dreher has since then made Hungary his permanent residence.
Seems to be a pattern.
Yeah, I'm sure very much in part due to the wonderful time that he had on our show. And two, we have an equally fascinating guest today. Professor John Mearsheimer will be joining us in the second half of our program. Whether or not he will move to Hungary, we do not know. We will certainly ask him to do it. But already for our first half, we have the beautiful and equally smart Andrea Nagy here with us, along with the testosterone-smelling patriarchy of the bench in the back, Ádám Varga, Mátyás Kohán, and Gav Duncan. Gav is actually another one of them Anglo-Saxon vagabonds who have taken the red pill and moved to Hungary permanently. But why did you do that?
I was young, I was looking for...
And you needed the money.
I was young and looking for adventure, and then I realised that, in fact...
Eastern Europe is a place for it.
Yeah, I was born in the wrong place. Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry,
right.
Mum, sorry, Dad, I was born in the wrong
And
place.
the forint was stronger.
Exactly.
Well, all you dear viewers have probably heard a lot of stuff about Hungary in the media. And if you listen to George Clooney, Roger Waters, Ian McKellen, or neo-Marxist members of the European Parliament,
Which, let's face it, that's all of them.
pretty much, yeah. But anyways, all these people, along with dozens more celebrities, politicians, and journalists, are constantly washing your brains with the exact same narrative. Hungarians are evil. We are a dark dictatorship that makes North Korea look like the holiday planet Risa in Star Trek: The Next Generation. And that the only reason we are not reigniting the gas chambers of the 1940s is because of the wonderful anti-Russian sanctions that are in place and that they have taken away the fuel. Thus, we're unable to reignite the chambers. One of the most blatant lies spread about Hungary in the Western press, one of the most appalling accusations is that we're siding with the Russians in the war against Ukraine. That our Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, is Putin's lapdog and eats from his hands, already having made us totally dependent on Russian gas and oil. Well, let me remind you why we are dependent on Russian oil. Because for most of the second half of the 20th century, while you guys were enjoying the benefits of the Marshall Plan, we were living under communism in the shadow of the Soviet Army's tanks and bayonets. It's not like we could have just built another pipeline to Budapest from, let's say, the fjords of Norway. Oh, we did revolt against the political oppression in 1956. It was crushed by the aforementioned Soviet tanks, all under the forgiving eye of the West. Confrontation with the Soviet Union, especially in the wake of the Suez Crisis, was not deemed beneficial at the time for the United States. I guess we weren't as important as Ukraine.
Well, I guess buying a farmland in foreign countries, it wasn't yet a thing back in, back then for the American businessmen. Or business interests.
I don't recall vice presidents turning their sons or daughters. I mean, let's be gender neutral, turning them into board members.
It's progress. Progress. This is modern life, guys. Come on, pick up.
Well, thing is, back then, the U.S. did not give a fat about Hungarian freedom. It was not us.
They don't now either.
That's the thing.
Nothing has changed.
Let's hold your horses.
No, I disagree because
they do. They're against it.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
All right. That's not the same thing. You're twisting my words.
Well, it was not us who chose our dependence on Russian gas and oil. In fact, in the past 12 years, we have actually diversified from Russian fuels, decreasing its percentage in our energy mix from nearly 100% to around 75%. But, gas pipes, they don't just materialize in the ground. We just have to scrape a little dust off of them, and presto! Energy infrastructure is one of the most time and cost requiring to build or to change.
Especially if the energy is in the United States and you're here.
Yeah, and now I think the question arises if it is really a good tactic to change or exchange from an Eastern dependency to a Western dependency. And all because the Western leaders now demonize the gas molecules even from Russia.
Those gas molecules are evil.
But I think Hungarians' approach is far more realistic than others because at a lot of forums, our Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó says and states that the energy security is not an ideological question, but strictly a physical one. And that's absolutely 100% true. And you don't even understand why it has to be stated even, for others. And because at the end of the day, when we talk about energy security, it has to be secure supply. So it means continuous supply. And of course, it has to be cheap, which is now the situation with the Russian energy sources. And it's a good thing if it is environmental friendly as well. But in that matter, the country who is giving very much advice on it for us, it's Germany, who actually shut down their nuclear plants, who switched back to coal, which is doing more environmental harm than ever. So I don't understand why the politicians are thinking about this and why people think that the clean energy movement will solve our problems, because the renewable energy sources are now unreliable. Completely. So it doesn't fulfill the requirements.
But people don't think they believe, and German people don't believe, they follow orders.
No. I'm defending the Germans. I'm defending the Germans.
Do it. I want to see it.
We want to hear that. Yeah.
What do you mean?
Okay.
You're defending the Germans?
I'm totally open to this idea.
Look, everybody in the world knows.
Except Germans.
knows that the spirit of the times is a German word. It's something the Germans
Zeitgeist.
Zeitgeist.
Yeah, but we didn't
now,
say
if you are a slave to the Zeitgeist, as the Germans are, you can't do anything but the thing that looks to be the most expedient and the most morally superior at the time. If you are the country, the people of the Zeitgeist, if you are the very people who gave the world the definition of Zeitgeist, you can't move against the Zeitgeist. It's obvious.
Well,
but if you're wrong,
there is a.
I
see the point.
Zeitgeist. At the point in time when the Zeitgeist is there, you're not wrong. you become wrong later.
I see the philosophical point in that argument, but in reality, that's bullshit, and that's not, that's not against you. But speaking of these molecules, that's an interesting thing. The gas molecules that are evil because they come from Russia. But the same gas molecules, if they go from Russia to a country,
to India,
let's say India, for example,
And we buy from
or
them.
somewhere in the Middle East, and then that country resells those exact same gas and oil molecules to Germany, miraculously, those molecules are not evil anymore. The Indians or the Saudis or whoever, they must have done something to those molecules to unevil them.
It's the same as money
Unevilize
laundering.
them.
It's just molecule laundering.
That's how-
now you mentioned the Saudis. It's funny that those people in Europe, in the Western countries, who's up for LGBT movements and the LGBT right activists, apparently they all travel to Dubai, to Saudi, to Middle Eastern countries for holiday, the countries where gay people are actually executed.
Or thrown off the
So how can you
rooftops.
give your money to those people who are executing your allies or the people who you are allying with? And then
That's different. That's okay, because then they have the morals.
You're looking for
Is
money.
You know why? You know why?
So it's the
I'll tell you.
historical heritage.
I'll tell you why they are allowed to give their money to the countries where gays are executed, because these same people have already given enough money and they have done so many good deeds for the LGBTQ community already that they are allowed to give money to people prosecuting gays. Just like Leonardo DiCaprio has done so much for the environment now.
He could use a jet.
He can use a private jet to fly to a conference. He's done so much already.
No, he can use a private jet to fly from his yacht to fly to a conference 8,000 miles to get a climate award and to fly back.
Adam, what I'm sensing here is jealousy. Okay,
But we're
Actually, yes, I do.
Yes.
I'm jealous for a yacht, for a private,
jealousy
and for a
too,
climate award.
and we're drifting.
For the look.
We're drifting away. We're drifting away from our subject.
Yes,
which I must get
molecules,
back to because
molecules.
we were talking about our prime minister's relationship with Putin. Well, as for that, let's look at how they're holding a meeting, or they were, just before the war broke out. In the exact same manner, Vladimir Putin spoke with French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. However, there are people who look at Putin in a much different way. Here we can see Ferenc Gyurcsány, leader of the Hungarian leftist opposition, back when he was prime minister.
Look at the way he's looking at him. It's sexuality embodied in one man.
But that's okay, Gab, because Gyurcsány is a Democrat, unlike the authoritarian fascist Orban.
It's like the I would like to have someone to look at me meme. I think
Absolutely.
we should produce Valentine's Day cards for next year.
You should find someone who looking at you
I
as
would
Gyurcsány
do
looking at
this
Putin.
And his dog.
Again, Adam,
And his
what
dog.
I'm hearing is jealousy.
Like
Again.
side note, guys, just a side note. It was that guy. It was that guy actually who increased, not decreased, increased our dependency on Russian gas. Let's just remember that at the time he was prime minister, the only way for Hungary to get gas at all was through Ukraine.
Was for looking
from
at the
Russia,
Putin like
from
that.
Russia. Not even the connection to Croatia existed. Not even the connection to Turkey through Serbia. Nothing existed. Only Russian gas and nothing else.
But that was okay because he's a Democrat.
And Putin was a Democrat too.
Oh, back then.
back then.
Okay.
Between
so-
2010 and 2020, actually, Hungary significantly decreased the dependency on energy sources from Russia.
You're
But,
listening.
of course,
You're listening well because I just said that 5 minutes ago. But
Oh.
you're a good student.
Say it again. Reinforce
because
it
we
so that
have
people
these
remember.
headphones and-
It's got to be the headphones. So the fact that Orban doesn't want to kill the Hungarian economy simply for the sake of virtue signaling and is not willing to stop importing Russian oil and gas makes him a comrade of Putin. Never mind that other European countries where there is at least a moderate sense of sanity left are also not cutting their energy ties. But of course they still brag about it for the sake of being Gutmensch, for virtue signaling. And for the same reason, they are imposing tons of other sanctions which actually hurt their countries much more than they do hurt the Russians.
Except for the diamonds. Don't touch my diamonds.
Oh yes, the diamonds in
And
Antwerp.
thoroughbred horses.
But don't take this from me. Take it from The Economist.
What communist?
The Economist refers,
The e-communist.
The Economist refers to an IMF report that said that Russia is actually coming out of recession and Europe is going into it. Bang.
Oops.
And Holland is a country who
Where?
actually trying.
Holland is not a country.
Oh
is it?
yeah.
No, Holland is
Low
Belgium.
Germany.
Belgium is not. That's Belgium. You're mixing them. What? But so our prime minister Again, the homophobic, fascist, blah, 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 authoritarian Orban.
Anti-trans.
Oh, yeah. He said the other day that Europe shot itself in the foot with the sanctions.
Eurosceptic.
But I think he's wrong. Europe has actually been flailing and swinging the sanctions sword right in front of the Russians' face so much and for so long until Europe actually succeeded in cutting its own dick off. Remember the nunchuk guy? Well, there we go. That's pretty much Europe right there. Except that this time, it's not that funny.
Kinda hurts.
It does. It really hurts.
You have experience.
I just see what you did
And
there.
it really
Personal
does.
experience of this.
And neither is the other.
inflated prices.
And the other side of the story is not funny either, because not only does the Western press lie about Hungary's totally untrue sucking up to Russia, but also about our hostility towards Ukraine. Hungary accepts somewhere between 10 and 15,000 Ukrainian refugees per day. So
Although
far,
the maximum was 28,000. There was
That's
one
the
day
big
with 28,000.
record. Yeah, we're talking about a total of over 1 million refugees so far in a country of 10 million. Yes, Poland, a country of 40 million, has processed over 5 million refugee claims, but we're not too far behind proportionally. And yes, some of these people move on to other countries, but hundreds of thousands of them have stayed and gotten temporary shelter, medical care, and jobs. Schools, yeah, absolutely.
Hospitals.
But it's not just the Western press bashing us. The Ukrainian government and its representatives do the same on the world stage, including their local ambassador.
But that's a language problem. They haven't yet learned how to say
But they don't
thank
have
you
one.
in Hungarian.
Well, but I mean, we understand English, so they could still.
They don't speak
could
it.
still
We
say
might even understand it in
Even
Ukrainian.
Russian.
Hell, I mean, okay, they don't speak in hell. They can say it in Ukrainian.
In Soviet.
We wouldn't mind. Adam, how is thank you in Ukrainian?
Right, in Ukrainian.
I'm sure it's
Right.
it's not
Right.
spasiba, is it?
It's not spasiba, it's дякую.
What?
Дякую.
There's something wrong with him. Hit
It's the same as in
Yes,
Slovakian
basically,
and
basically
in Czech.
similar to Polish. It's like a
Slovakian,
drunk Slovakian tries to speak on Polish. This is
That's
how
okay.
it sounds.
And why does Adam know all this so well?
Well, wait,
Because
before you tell my story, let's play some sad song. Not you.
sad songs to make you cry. Well, Adam is from Ukraine, yes. And
I
on that,
managed to get out alive.
on that note, let me give you
And
all
they don't
you
want you back.
Let me give all you wonderful, kind, well-meaning, but less informed people a very short briefing on another piece of Hungarian history. As you may know, or more
No,
probably,
no.
more
You
probably
don't
you
know.
may not. We were on the losing side in both world wars. Again, this was not because of our free will. In the second one, we managed to stay out until 1944. This time, it was the Germans who forced us into it by simply
defend them, Marty, defend
It was
them.
the zeitgeist. Hitler
the zeitgeist.
knew the
Okay.
zeitgeist.
Well, they forced us into the war simply by invading and occupying our country. They called it Operation Margarete. And in the First World War, it was the assassination of the Austrian heir to the throne, Franz Ferdinand, in Sarajevo by Serbian nationalists that ignited the flame and led Austria to declare war against Serbia. But because Austria was allied to Germany and was afraid of a possible retaliation by the Russians, who were allied with the Serbs, the Austrians asked the Germans about their stand on the issue. Emperor William's answer to Emperor Franz Joseph: Austria can count on Germany's full support. Bang! There you go! And Hungary was in a dual monarchy with Austria at the time, and Hungarian Prime Minister István Tisza opposed joining the war. But because Austria had the final say in military affairs,
In everything.
and they had Germany's support, they dragged us in, and we all lost 4 years later. And in 1921, the Treaty of Trianon was signed near Versailles, France, in which
Treaty.
treaty.
Peace was dictated, I would prefer.
Okay, well, in this document, the punishment of and the fate of Hungary was crafted out by the prevailing powers.
Exactly.
And this is Hungary before and after the treaty. 71.4% of our territory was taken away, with 63.5% of the population also being forced to live under foreign rule from then on. Out of the 6 countries that received parts of our territory, just the part that was awarded to Romania was actually larger than the bit they left us with. 61.4% of our farmland and a whopping 83.4% of our forests were taken away. Since all the mountainous regions were gone, we lost our mines and most of our factories. Gone were also 2/3 of our cities and towns, 73.8% of our paved roads, 62.1% of our railroads, and 75% of our actual trains and freight cars. Enough of the statistics. Why was all this? Because we were the bad guys. Okay, when a country loses a war, sure, you don't exactly pat them on the shoulder. But before World War I, and this is very important, all previous peace treaties ending various wars on the continent were actual treaties. They all had some sort of element where the interests of the losing party were taken into consideration. Not so much because of righteousness, I mean, winners were pigs back then too, but because of practical reasons. To satisfy the losing side, just enough to make sure it doesn't attempt war again. But this time, they wanted to set an example once and for all. Hungary was the last delegation to be received by the winning parties, and the deal was already done. The ink on the document sealing our future was dry. Instead of giving the losers a bone to chew on, the winners decided to stomp them, specifically Germany and Austria-Hungary, into the ground. Total humiliation.
That'll teach them.
Well, it didn't.
No, true.
The result, as we all know, was World War II. Germany sought revenge, and they lost again. But this time, by some graceful act of God, politicians with more brains were running the countries of the West, especially the US. So instead of punishment, Germany received the Marshall Plan.
Well, and today it's idiots reigning free again, it looks like. And these days, they don't just want to beat Russia, but they want to annihilate it.
To knock it off the world stage. It has no place there. But there's a small problem. Russia too has nuclear weapons.
Yep, they do. And we can't get into detailed... Quite a lot, yeah.
A couple.
We can't really
handful.
A couple.
Just a couple. Okay, well, we really can't get
It's
into...
more than enough, basically.
Okay, any more ways to
Martin,
describe the number of missiles, nuclear missiles Russia has? I'm giving you guys a chance.
Немножко.
Okay, go on. Before I go into my next segment here.
My last.
Anyway, we can't really get into detailed geopolitical reasonings right now. Our time is limited, and our guest in the second half, Mr. Mearsheimer, is coming to us exactly for that. But there is a little more to this issue, which also explains Hungary's reluctance to send arms, weapons, any sort of direct military aid to Ukraine. As we have just explained in our Lightspeed course on 20th century Hungarian history, a lot of our Hungarian brothers have been forced to be citizens of another country for over a century now. Not because they decided to live somewhere else. They have not moved an inch. The border was moved above their heads, and this includes about 200,000 ethnic Hungarians living in the Subcarpathia region, or Oblast, of Ukraine, formerly part of Hungary. At least this was their number before the war started. And if we had gotten directly involved, they would have been in the crosshairs immediately for Russian retaliation. The safety of our people is our main concern. Unlike the US, which leaves its allies, even some of its own people, in Taliban or other enemies' hands these days, we don't do this. Well, to be fair, neither was this American practice before Joe Biden, or Hillary Clinton in Benghazi for that matter. But hey, times change. But not for us. We care for our brothers, even if they live in another country. Oh, and just a final piece of info. Most of them stuck it out and haven't fled Ukraine neither during nor before the war. Okay, Adam, he did. But he moved to London, so I'm not exactly sure that counts as an upgrade.
Out of the frying pan, into the fire.
No. Out of a frying pan into a larger frying pan.
The London expert has spoken.
Actually, and these ethnic Hungarians have had a shitty life under the much beloved Ukrainians, who are not only completely ready for EU membership, but their leaders are actually Christ reincarnated, according to, again, the Western press. In reality, these Ukrainians have passed a law recently which strips all of their ethnic populations, including Russians, Romanians, and Hungarians, of their right to use their native language in local administrations. Also, education above 4th grade can only happen in Ukrainian. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, under which many atrocities, both official and subtle.
Right, sorry, just interrupting you. It happened to a friend of mine. She's about 40 years old lady, and what happened to her? She's ill, extremely ill. She went to the hospital, and she went to school before Ukraine actually existed, because before freedom of Ukraine, she learned Russian
Within the Soviet Union.
Yes, in the Soviet Union, she speaks Russian, and of course Hungarian because she's Hungarian. She went to hospital in a place where the information is key in the right time, and she has been shamed because she didn't speak Ukrainian but Hungarian or Russian. So by the doctors who actually can speak Hungarian too, because it's a
Russian
because it's a Hungarian historical territory. So it's basically the population, the 75% of the population is Hungary and it's historical people.
Well, this is the kind of shit that happens that you never hear a word about.
And if you do,
in
it
the
says
Western press.
lie. Because I actually mentioned a few stories and actually asked people to talk about it, and comments again, it's lie, it's not true, it's never happened.
And that's it. And they're done.
Not
They
that
don't
you
care.
would have seen anywhere. Yeah.
No.
It's a lie. Okay.
You're expecting too much of the West.
People who have
Sorry.
never been across the Atlantic know better than you.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
fine.
no question. Come on, they're Americans. But a lot of these atrocities were done by Ukrainian paramilitary Nazi brigades, and they have been continuously committing these atrocities for years on a daily basis against some of these people just because of their ethnicity. But we have put all of that aside because war is a different matter. Being attacked in your home puts many old grievances aside. And we decided to give all the humanitarian aid we can to everyone coming from Ukraine, be it ethnic Hungarians, Ukrainian nationals, or Nigerian students having studied in Kiev. But the Western press and its politicians are ignorant as usual, or they are outright liars biased against us, because we have a government that does not bow to the leftist globalist mob, whether it's taken in Middle Eastern migrants, lighting our stadiums in LGBTQ colors, or taking a knee in international football tournaments.
And one last point about the ignorance of the West. It really is nothing short of scandalous. There was a French woman living in our house. So a French woman, a foreigner, came to Hungary, bought a flat here, knows nothing of anything. Now, I'm not expecting these people to know everything about Hungarian history, but when we had a conversation with her, because she was saying to us, why are the Hungarians so anti-Ukrainian? It's like, no, you don't understand, dear. Listen, we explained about the 200,000 Hungarians living there, and it's like, oh, so they went there to work. It's like, oh, for the love of Christ, no. Do you not understand? Ukraine is a failed state. It cannot exist. It has no money to
You
pay.
said failed or fake?
Failed. Well,
Close enough.
both of them. But this woman was so entrenched in Western thinking that the idea of a group of people moving from one country to another, well, it can only be for work opportunities. It's like, no, you cretin, they were born there. It's like, what? How were they born there? It's like, of course it's cretin, because she's French. But she couldn't get it. And after about 10 minutes of trying to explain it, it was just like, oh, well, yeah, okay, goodbye. Please.
I tried to explain a friend of mine in the UK, and then the way I explain it is, imagine if someone draws a border around you and you have to stay there because you can't fucking leave. And then he could get it. But then when I said to there was a guy who was extremely neoliberal, textbook liberal. And Mark, if you're watching it, I'm talking about Barrage, the Google guy. So basically what happened...
Send him the link to make sure.
I do, that's why I'm telling him. So basically what happened, I said to the guy that how much racism we experienced from the Ukrainians. So the systematical racism, but basically Hungarian minority has no rights whatsoever. And he said, yeah, but that's among you. Like, what do you mean? Well, that's among white people. It's your business. So what the fuck are you talking about?
So what? White on white racism? That's
not. The guy was from India, and it wasn't a real racism because it's white people.
No, so white that it's not real. But anyway, I'm interested in the French woman, and this is a very silly question. Did she come around? Did she understand? Does she understand now?
No, she's French. She said it.
French.
It was 10 minutes of explaining everything as you would do to a preschool child, and after 10 minutes it was just like. Huh? It's like, okay, fuck it, forget it.
You caught her in pre-snake time.
You should have given her a
baguette. In
baguette.
snake time, she would have understood.
Oh, you know what? You should show her pantomime. You know?
I am not doing any funny French shit. I'm not doing
or present it in a croissant. Inside of a croissant, like in a fortune.
Here's a croissant,
like in a fortune
here's
cookie.
a baguette. Do you understand? Okay, now I will take the baguette and I will rip it in half.
And then she will slap you then. If you
Do you
break the
understand?
baguette.
Okay, well, enough of the French and enough of Ukraine, because there's more to highlight, more problems which we Hungarians face. And one thing is the problem of double standards. And this, let's face it, is a perennial problem. Time and time again, we find ourselves on the receiving end in a process which appears to be motivated solely by imperialistic traditions. Cast your minds back to the European Football Championships in 2020. This was the time of players taking the knee and wearing rainbow patches to show allegiance to the cause of voluntary genital mutilation by the mentally impaired and psychologically damaged. Hungary typically was cast as the black sheep. We booed when players took the knee, and our players refused to play ball. Literally. This, again, is due to history. We had no empire. We had no colonies. We did not enslave anyone. We were, in fact, enslaved by the Turks.
And the Austrians. And the Germans. And the Soviets.
No, you're not defending the Germans.
Not anymore. He changed. Unlike the French.
Zeitgeist.
Unlike
It's
the
the
French
Austrians, my guy.
Unlike the French woman, Marty now understands the world. But we have nothing, not one little tiny thing to do with the moral posturing and virtue signaling that followed the death of George Floyd. At one game in Budapest, in a tournament which incidentally showcased Hungarian organization to be world class, a journalist from France.
Croissant.
Yes.
Baguette. Mr. Baguette.
A guy with a baguette and a
Pierre
croissant.
Baguette.
Oui. A man who does not speak Hungarian reported that he had heard various football fans directing homophobic slurs at some of the Spanish, was it? Or what Portuguese players? What did he think he heard? I don't know how to call someone a poof in French. Le poof? How in the name of all things holy does this little jumped up pastry chef have the audacity to report that he heard homophobic abuse, verbal abuse, name calling in a language he does not speak? Hungary was punished by having to play 3 games behind closed doors. So, no money from ticket sales. Again, David has his pocket money confiscated by Goliath. Now, at the final, held in Wembley, it was a different affair. Pitched battles in Leicester Square. Pitched battles in the very heart of London. English fans bombarding each other with bottles from all 4 corners of the square.
Democratic battles.
They don't hurt when they hit you.
As we could see, yes, very democratic bottles. And then the chaos at the stadium. Ticketless fans forced their way in. Again, pitched battles. One fan nicked the steward's coat, then pounced on a man who was pushing his handicapped son along in a wheelchair. He then used the kid in the wheelchair to blag his way in. And when he was in, he wheeled the kid off in one direction, dumped his coat, and went to find a seat. And what was the punishment meted out to the English? 1 match to be played behind closed doors, potentially a second match to be played behind closed doors, depending on how they behave in a probationary period of 2 years, and a fine of 100,000 euros, which is peanuts to English football. Now,
They have left the EU, and this is what happened.
Exactly. So they've left the EU, but they're still part of the club. So
Yeah, they're still.
Gotta pay the fine in euros.
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, can this ever be considered fair? Can the 2 incidents even be compared? Alleged verbal abuse reported by someone who doesn't speak the language of the alleged abuse? Or the wanton destruction of a city center, followed by the storming of the gates of Wembley with women and children, handicapped children too, left shell-shocked. Which one should be punished more severely? And why didn't that happen? And are we expected to not notice, to not comment on the fact that when others spit in our faces, we're supposed to just lick it off and say thank you? Apparently these days, since globalist woke Marxism hijacked the once wonderful project of a peaceful and unified Europe, this is how European institutions, whether it's the FIFA or the European Parliament, treat the dissenting voices, the ones who dare question the narrative, who are not willing to give up their nation, their religion, their identity, those who don't take a knee, neither literally nor symbolically. This was the first half of today's installment of our show, The Political Hobbyist. In a few seconds, we'll be back with Professor John Mearsheimer to talk about geopolitics, Ukraine, and whatnot. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be a very fascinating discussion, so stay tuned.